Cool and pale, Friday the 13th Part 3 gave us Jason in his iconic hockey mask for the very first time, and the death of cheerful goofball Andy has gone on to become one of the most celebrated kills in the entire franchise. The setup is pure horror movie irony. Andy and his pregnant girlfriend Debbie have just finished a romp in the bedroom and she's gone off to take a shower. Ever the playful clown, Andy decides to walk to the kitchen on his hands to grab her a beer, strolling down the hallway upside down with his legs flailing comically in the air. Jason emerges silently from the shadows, takes one look at the inverted teenager, and seizes the opportunity without hesitation. He swings his machete with absolutely terrifying force, cleaving Andy clean in two with one single devastating downward chop. But the horror doesn't end there. Debbie later sinks into a hammock to read a magazine, completely unaware of the fate her boyfriend has just suffered. She feels a single warm drop land on the page in front of her. Then another. She looks up, and there's Andy's bisected corpse jammed grotesquely into the rafters above her, dripping onto her one slow drop at a time. Before she can even scream, Jason thrusts a knife straight up through the underside of the hammock and through her chest from below. A genuinely outrageous double feature of cruelty. Wire slice. Ghost Ship's opening sequence is widely considered one of the most jaw-dropping pre-credits scenes in modern horror history, and while the film itself may divide opinion among genre fans, absolutely nobody disputes that its first 5 minutes contain a kill so elegantly horrifying that it has gone on to overshadow the entire rest of the picture. It's 1962, and the luxury Italian liner Antonia Grazza is alive with music, laughter, and twirling couples in evening wear. While a sultry chanteuse croons Senza Fine in the grand ballroom, a smaller, more intimate gathering of guests dances on the forecastle at the bow of the ship, including a young girl named Katie sweetly waltzing in the arms of the kindly captain himself. What none of them realize is that deep inside the ship, a hand has just pulled a hidden lever, sending a thin steel cable winding tighter and tighter on a concealed spool. The cable snaps free and whips across the dance floor in a single horizontal blur. For one suspended moment, nothing appears to have happened. Then, slowly, the bodies begin to slide apart. Torsos peel away from legs at the waist. The captain's face splits open at mouth level as the top of his skull slides clean off above tiny Katie, who was spared only by her small stature. Jaw drop. Hatchet serves up a genuinely astonishing selection of ludicrously over-the-top kills, courtesy of the film's hulking antagonist Victor Crowley, and the movie's most infamous set piece involves the brutal death of middle-aged tourist Shannon Permateo. After their swamp tour boat sinks, Shannon and her injured husband Jim find themselves stumbling through the darkness of the bayou, eventually arriving at a derelict cabin that the rest of the panicked group refuses to approach. Shannon, undeterred and calling the others cowards, drags Jim up to the door herself in search of help. That's when Crowley emerges. He seizes Jim and hacks him clean in half with the hatchet right in front of his wife. Shannon turns and flees, screaming, but Crowley is already on top of her. He grabs her by the head, jams his hands into her mouth, and then proceeds to rip her entire skull apart at the jaw. The effect is rendered in genuinely astonishing practical detail. An absolutely deranged piece of practical effects. Skin suit. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 cranks the dial firmly towards blackly comic excess. But the sequel still serves up some supremely unpleasant set pieces, and easily the most jaw-dropping is the protracted, genuinely disturbing death of L.G. McPeters. While Leatherface is busy menacing Stretch elsewhere in the station, Chop Top sneaks up on L.G. and brutally bludgeons him over the head with a hammer in a prolonged, queasy assault that goes on for far longer than feels comfortable to watch. But the real horror comes later. LG's body is hauled back to the Sawyer family's underground lair, where he's slumped semi-conscious as Stretch is brought in and tied up. Leatherface then peels the entire skin off LG's face and skull in one grotesquely intimate sequence, and immediately places the bloody mask onto Stretch's face as a twisted gesture of affection. In a final twist of cruelty, the half-dead, faceless LG somehow recovers just enough awareness to take Leatherface's discarded knife and saw through the ropes binding Stretch, all while tenderly telling her not to be scared. He then collapses and finally dies in her arms. Genuinely unpleasant on every possible level. Opening act, Scream famously kicks off with one of the most audaciously constructed opening sequences in slasher history, anchored by the harrowing death of Casey Becker. It begins with Casey innocently making popcorn at home alone when the phone rings. The seemingly playful caller gradually reveals he's watching her, and the conversation descends into a twisted horror movie trivia game. The stakes escalate when he reveals her boyfriend Steve has been tied up on the patio. When Casey answers that Jason was the killer in the original Friday the 13th, the patio lights flick on to reveal Steve already gutted, his entrails spilling out in horrifying detail. Ghostface then hurls a chair through the patio doors, and Casey is forced to flee through her own home, sobbing as she sees her parents' headlights coming down the long driveway. She's caught just meters from salvation, stabbed brutally in the chest, and crawls in agony toward the car as her parents step out. Her mother finds her moments later, hanging from a tree in the front yard, gutted exactly like her boyfriend. A masterclass in sustained slasher dead in a box. Seven may not be a traditional slasher in the strictest sense of the word, but David Fincher's grimy, rain-soaked masterpiece absolutely belongs in any conversation about the most genuinely shocking deaths ever committed to film. And the discovery of poor Tracy Mills's fate in the film's now legendary climax is arguably the single most devastating gut punch the genre has ever delivered. Detectives Mills and Somerset arrive at a desolate, sun-scorched stretch of nowhere with their captured serial killer John Doe in tow, completely unaware of what's been arranged for them. A delivery van suddenly appears on the horizon and pulls up nearby with a mysterious package on board. Somerset jogs ahead to intercept the driver while Mills stays behind with a handcuffed Doe. He opens the box. His face crumples in absolute horror at what he sees inside, and he immediately begins sprinting back across the dirt, screaming at his partner to drop his weapon. Doe, meanwhile, calmly informs Mills that he visited his home earlier that day, that he was envious of Mills' perfect life, and that Tracy's severed head is what's currently sitting inside the box. Mills slowly unravels in real time as the horrifying realization sinks in. And then, in the cruelest twist of all, Doe casually reveals that Tracy was pregnant, a fact Mills himself didn't even know. Despite Somerset's desperate pleas, Mills raises his pistol and empties it into Doe, completing the killer's twisted Seven Deadly Sins masterpiece, devastating on every conceivable level. Shower scene. Psycho is the film that didn't just codify the slasher genre, it invented the entire vocabulary of cinematic murder as we now understand it. Marion has fled town with a stolen envelope of cash and pulled into the rain-soaked Bates Motel for the night. After a quiet, unsettling sandwich supper in the parlor with the strangely intense young proprietor Norman surrounded by his collection of stuffed birds, she retires to her room, undresses, and steps into the shower to wash the day away. The water is warm. Her face is finally peaceful. She's resolved to return the money in the morning. Then a shadow appears on the other side of the curtain. It's wrenched aside without warning, and a figure in old woman's clothing begins stabbing her. Bernard Herrmann's shrieking violin strings stabbing in time with each downward thrust of the knife. The cuts come fast and disorienting. Marion clutches desperately at the shower curtain as she collapses, tearing it from its rings as she sinks down, her dead eye finally dissolving into the swirling water of the drain. Say what you will about the supernatural killers, the masked maniacs, and the elaborate gore set pieces that followed in the decades since. There's genuinely something about the raw, unflinching shock of this moment that nothing has ever quite managed to replicate. The sudden violence, the unbearable vulnerability, it all coalesces into a sequence so foundational that every slasher kill since has essentially been a footnote to it. Thanks for sticking around till the end. I'll see you in the next one.